Sterling Opera House is built in 1889 by Charles Sterling, owner of the Sterling Piano Factory here in Derby. He basically built it to showcase his pianos. On either side of the stage there are piano boxes on the lower, on either side of the stage there's piano boxes, and if you look at them they resemble stereo speakers, having a woofer and a tweeter, so to speak. The lower range instruments sat in the bottom, and the high fidelity instruments like violins and piccolos, whatever, and flutes were on top. That accounts for the upper and lower boxes there. They weren't luxury boxes by any means, and people often misinterpret them. We're just working on the Opera House to get attention. So figured the old adage was, to bring attention to something, get yourself a ghost. And we somehow found a ghost in there, or several ghosts in there. So-called spirits, they say there are 18 in there. And they range from a little boy, little girl. The little boy is supposedly named Andy. Andy can move objects, he moves a ball. He's kind of playful and very picky on who he talks to, but the kid is there, and we have him moving balls, we have him moving little toy trucks, and he sings. So, it seems like a happy kid. What he has to do with the Opera House, God only knows. We have physical anomalies that, happen to people. I've had people get scratched to a point that you're bleeding and stuff like that. In the last several months, we had 3 people scratched. One person was from the A&E network. He got scratched head to toe. And these scratches were happening right before our eyes, and he even left the building, and he was getting scratched outside the building as well. The theater sat about 1,200 people in there. Believe it or not, the people were much smaller back then, so you could fit in the seats. I'm actually sitting in the set of folding seats from the Opera House that we salvaged from the Opera House a couple years ago. People that played the stage read like a who's who of vaudeville. Basically, anybody who ran the vaudeville circuit back then in the day graced the stage. So you had Caruso, Houdini, you had much of the young George Burns, Gracie Allen, Milton Berle, Red Skelton. You name it, anybody who did the, they traveled by train, stopped in Derby. Derby, you had to cut through Derby to get to anywhere else in New England from New York City. So Derby was one of the earlier stops. And they had to have an opera house. Opera house is a generic term for theater. They didn't have movie theaters back then. Although the first feature-length film with sound was the movie from D.W. Griffith called Birth of a Nation. That premiered there. And D.W. Griffith premiered several of his films there back in the day. So they altered the place to show theatrical performances, movies and stuff. So they set up a screen, they set up an area, the chairs, they set up the projector to show the movies in the theater. But basically the theater was for vaudeville and burlesque, so you're more apt to see in the afternoon dancing ladies on the stage, and for a nickel you pay a nickel, see dancing girls. Most of the times you go in the building and everybody expects to see a ghost. Right now it doesn't happen all the time. You got to be in tuned. The person, or in other words, the person going in there, you can't go in there looking for a ghost because you're not going to find one. You got to be, let's say, in tuned for it. So you got a creative person is more apt to see a ghost or an apparition or experience something in there, rather than an analytical person, let's say like an accountant or a lawyer. Although they can see stuff too. So you got to be open. So usually the creatives, musicians, artists, photographers, they're open to different ideas, different things, different possibilities, and more apt to be receptive to whatever is going on. We've had people that go into the Opera House for years, 20, 30 years, never seen a thing until recently.